Lisa Carter felt the ship shake around her as another blast hit the hull. Red lights flashed in the narrow corridor of the patrol vessel. Meridian and alarms screamed through the metal walls. She pressed her back against the cold surface and checked her weapon one more time. The energy cell showed half power remaining. Her team was gone. Martinez had taken a plasma bolt to the chest in the engine room. Johnson never made it out of the cargo bay when the first boarding party broke through. Williams was somewhere in the forward section, but his comm had gone silent 10 minutes ago. Lisa knew she was alone on a dying ship. The Kreks had come out of nowhere. Their ships appeared from behind the asteroid field like hungry predators stalking prey. The Meridian was just a small patrol craft with basic weapons and shields. Against 3 Kreks battle cruisers, it never stood a chance. Lisa had tried to send a distress signal, but the enemy jammers cut through their communications like a knife through paper-heavy. Footsteps echoed in the corridor ahead. The Kreks were coming. Lisa had heard stories about these reptilian warriors from other sectors. They stood 8 feet tall with thick scales that could stop most small arms' fire. Their claws could tear through metal and their jaws could crush bone. But worse than their physical strength was their culture. The Kreks loved violence and pain. They kept prisoners alive, not for information, but for entertainment. Lisa aimed her weapon down the corridor and waited. She could hear them talking in their harsh, guttural language. The footsteps grew louder. She steadied her breathing and prepared to fight. When the first Krek soldier rounded the corner, she fired 3 quick shots. The energy bolts hit his chest armor and scattered harmlessly. The creature looked down at the scorch marks and laughed. More soldiers appeared behind the first one. Lisa fired again and again, but her weapon barely scratched their thick armor. One of them raised what looked like a net launcher and fired. The energy mesh wrapped around her body and sent electricity through her muscles. She fell to the deck, twitching as the current overwhelmed her nervous system. The Krek soldiers stood over her fallen form and spoke in their alien tongue. Lisa could not understand the words, but she recognized the tone. They were pleased. One of them grabbed her by the arm and lifted her like she weighed nothing. Her body felt heavy and numb from the energy net, but she could still think clearly. They dragged her through the corridors of her own ship. Lisa saw the bodies of her crew scattered along the way. The Kreks had not been gentle with them. Blood covered the walls and floor in dark stains. She forced herself to look away and focus on staying conscious. If she was going to survive this, she needed to stay alert. The boarding tunnel connected the Meridian to one of the Krek ships. Lisa felt the artificial gravity shift as they crossed from one vessel to another. The alien ship smelled of metal and something else she could not identify. The corridors were wider and darker than human ships. Strange symbols covered the walls like some kind of writing system. They threw her into a small cell with metal bars. The floor was hard and cold against her body as feeling slowly returned to her limbs. Lisa sat up and looked around. The cell was barely large enough for her to lie down. A small opening in one wall provided water but no food. Light came from strips along the ceiling that hurt her eyes. Hours passed before anyone came to see her. Lisa used the time to test her strength and check for injuries. Her body ached from the energy net, but nothing seemed broken. Her uniform was torn in several places and her equipment was gone. The Kreks had taken everything, including her boots. When footsteps finally approached her cell, Lisa was ready. A massive Kreks warrior stopped in front of the bars and stared down at her. His scales were darker than the soldiers who had captured her, and strange markings covered his arms. When he spoke, his voice was deep and rough like grinding stone. The translator device on his belt converted his words into English. "I am War Chief Thrax of the battlecruiser Bloodfang. You are my prisoner now, human. Your weak species interests me. I have heard you break easily under pressure." Lisa met his gaze without flinching. She had dealt with bullies before in the military. The trick was not to show fear even when your heart was pounding. "My name is Captain Lisa Carter of the Earth Defense Force. I demand to be treated according to Galactic prisoner conventions." Thrax laughed and the sound echoed off the metal walls. "There are no conventions here, human. This is Krek space and you will follow Krek's law. You belong to me now and I will decide what happens to you. The war chief turned and walked away, leaving Lisa alone again. She waited until his footsteps faded, before allowing herself to slump against the wall. The situation was bad but not hopeless. She was alive and uninjured. That was more than many prisoners could say after dealing with the Krex. More time passed, and Lisa tried to stay focused. She counted the light cycles to track time and did exercises to keep her body strong. The Krex brought her food once per day. It tasted terrible but provided enough nutrition to keep her alive. Water came from the wall dispenser whenever she needed it. On the third day, guards came to her cell. They opened the door and gestured for her to come out. Lisa stood slowly and followed them through the ship. They walked for several minutes through corridors filled with Krex crew members. The aliens stared at her as she passed. Some made sounds that might have been laughter. They brought her to a large room with high ceilings. Other cages lined the walls, and Lisa could see creatures inside them. Some looked familiar from intelligence reports, but others were completely alien. One cage held a massive four-armed being that must have been a Gorlani warrior. Another contained something that looked like a giant insect with blade-like arms. The guards pushed Lisa into an empty cage next to the insect creature. The door slammed shut with a heavy clang. She grabbed the bars and looked around at her fellow prisoners. Most of them stared back with expressions she could not read. The four-armed Gorlani spoke first. "Welcome to the pits, human. I am Zeph, and I have been here for 2 months. That is Krix beside you. He is silthery and very dangerous. We are all here for the same reason. Entertainment for the Krex." Lisa nodded and introduced herself. She had heard about Gorlani warriors. They were known for their strength and honor in battle. The silthery were assassins and spies from the Outer Rim. Both species were far more dangerous than humans in direct combat. "What kind of entertainment?" Lisa asked, though she already suspected the answer. Zeph pointed to the far end of the room where a large door was set into the wall. "They make us fight in the arena, sometimes against each other and sometimes against their beasts. Winners live until the next fight. Losers feed the animals." Krix spoke for the first time. His voice was soft but carried an edge of menace. "The human will not last long. Your species is weak and slow. The Krex will throw you to the hellhounds for sport." Lisa did not reply. She had learned long ago that action spoke louder than words. Let them think she was weak. It would make things easier when the time came to show them what humans were really capable of. She settled back in her cage and waited for her chance. The arena door opened with a grinding sound that echoed through the holding area. Lisa watched as Krex guards approached the cages with electric prods and weapons drawn. They moved with the confidence of beings who had done this many times before. The other prisoners stirred restlessly as the guards got closer. "Today we test the new human," one guard announced through his translator. "War Chief Thrax wants to see how long she lasts against the pack." Zeph turned to Lisa with something that might have been sympathy in his 4 eyes. "The hellhounds are the easiest trial they have. If you cannot survive them, you will not see another day. Stay moving and do not let them surround you." Krix made a sound that could have been laughter. "Advice is wasted on dead meat. The human will be torn apart before she takes 10 steps into the arena." The guards opened Lisa's cage and motioned for her to come out. She moved slowly and kept her hands visible. No point in getting shocked by the prods before the real fight began. They marched her through the corridors toward the arena while other Krex crew members gathered to watch. Lisa could hear their excited chatter through the translator devices. The arena was larger than she had expected. The floor was covered in sand that looked stained with old blood. High walls surrounded the fighting area, and viewing platforms filled with Krex spectators rose above them. Bright lights made everything clearly visible. There was nowhere to hide. Lisa looked around and noted the layout carefully. The walls were smooth metal with no handholds or weapons. A few large rocks were scattered across the sand, along with some metal debris that might have been left from previous fights. Near one wall she spotted what looked like a drainage grate. The crowd above grew louder as more Krex arrived to watch. War Chief Thrax stood on the main viewing platform directly across from the entrance. His dark scales gleamed under the lights and his yellow eyes were fixed on Lisa, When he spoke, his voice carried clearly through the arena's sound system. Today we test the human female. She claims to be a warrior, but we shall see if her species has any true strength. Release the pack. A section of the wall opened on the far side of the arena. 6 creatures emerged from the darkness beyond. The hellhounds were about the size of large dogs, but built like predators. Their bodies were covered in black fur, and each one had 6 legs ending in razor-sharp claws. Rows of teeth filled their mouths, and Lisa could see drops of acid dripping from their jaws onto the sand. The pack spread out as they entered the arena. They moved with practiced coordination like they had hunted together many times before. Their eyes glowed red in the bright lights, and they made low growling sounds as they approached. Lisa counted them carefully and watched how they positioned themselves. Zeph had been right about staying mobile. The hellhounds were trying to surround her and cut off escape routes. Lisa started walking sideways along the wall to prevent them from getting behind her. The crowd above cheered as the predators got closer. The alpha male was easy to identify. He was larger than the others, and the pack looked to him for signals. When he stopped, the others stopped. When he moved, they followed. Lisa focused on him. While keeping track of the others in her peripheral vision, the first attack came without warning. One of the smaller hellhounds lunged forward with jaws open wide. Lisa dodged to the side, and the creature's acid spit hit the wall where she had been standing. The metal began to smoke and bubble from the corrosive liquid. Lisa kept moving as more attacks came. The hellhounds were fast, but they had a pattern. After spitting acid, they needed a few seconds to produce more. She used that time to change position and force them to adjust their formation. The crowd grew quieter as they realized the human was not panicking. The alpha decided to coordinate a group attack. 3 hellhounds charged from different directions while the others cut off retreat routes. Lisa had been expecting this. She grabbed one of the metal debris pieces and threw it at the alpha's head. The creature dodged, but the distraction gave her time to reach the large rocks near the center of the arena from her new position. Lisa could see the pack's formation more clearly. They were used to prey that either ran in panic or tried to fight them directly. She was doing neither. Instead, she watched their movements and learned their timing. The acid spit traveled in straight lines and took time to aim. When the next coordinated attack came, Lisa was ready. She used the rocks as shields against the acid while forcing the hellhounds to approach from limited angles. 2 of them tried to climb over the rocks to reach her. Lisa grabbed a sharp piece of metal and drove it into the first one's throat. As it leaped toward her, the wounded hellhound fell, thrashing in the sand. Its packmates backed away from the blood and made nervous sounds. Lisa could see confusion in their glowing eyes. Their prey was not supposed to fight back effectively. She pressed her advantage by going on the offensive. Instead of waiting for attacks, Lisa started moving toward the alpha male. The creature spit acid at her, but she had already anticipated the angle and rolled aside. The corrosive liquid hit one of the other pack members, who screamed and ran. The crowd above was completely silent now. Even War Chief Thrax leaned forward on his platform to get a better view. This was not going according to their expectations. Lisa reached the drainage grate and pried it open with her metal weapon. Inside were old bones and refuse from previous fights. She grabbed a long thigh bone that looked sturdy enough to use as a club. The alpha hellhound circled her warily while the remaining pack members spread out again. The key was understanding pack behavior. Lisa had studied predator psychology during her military training. These creatures were smart, but they followed instincts that could be exploited. She needed to challenge the alpha's authority and break up the group coordination when the alpha charged. Lisa did not try to dodge. Instead, she met the attack head-on and drove the bone club into the creature's skull. The impact sent shock waves through her arms, but the hellhound dropped to the sand motionless. The remaining pack members froze in confusion. Without their leader, the hellhounds lost their coordinated tactics. Lisa picked them off one by one, using the rocks and debris as weapons. She forced them to fight on her terms in spaces where their numbers gave no advantage. Each kill was quick and efficient. The last hellhound tried to flee back toward the wall opening, but Lisa cut it off. She cornered the creature near the arena entrance and finished it with a piece of sharp metal to the spine. Then she stood among the Badas and looked up at the silent crowd. War Chief Thrax stared down at her with an expression she could not read. The other Krek spectators whispered among themselves in their harsh language. Lisa could tell this was not what they had expected to see. A weak human female had just killed an entire pack of their arena beasts. Without taking serious injury, the arena door opened and guards entered to escort her back to the holding area. Lisa dropped her makeshift weapons and raised her hands. She had made her point for now. As they marched her through the corridors, she could hear excited chatter from Krek's crew members who had witnessed the fight back in the holding area. Zeph and Krix stared at her with new respect. The Golani warrior spoke first. That was impressive. Human, I have seen many fighters in this arena, but few handle the hellhounds so easily. You have skills that were not obvious before. Krix was more direct. You are not what you appear to be. Your movements were too precise and your tactics too advanced for a simple patrol ship captain. What are you really? Lisa settled back in her cage without answering. She had learned to keep her secrets until the right moment. Let them wonder about her background. It would make the next fight more interesting when War Chief Thrax decided to increase the stakes. The lights dimmed to simulate night cycle and the holding area grew quiet. Lisa closed her eyes and reviewed the arena layout in her mind. She had bought herself time and gained some respect, but this was only the beginning. The Kreks would not underestimate her again tomorrow, would bring new challenges and deadlier opponents. Lisa would be ready for them. She always was. Word of the humans' victory spread through the Krek ship faster than Lisa had expected. Guards whispered to each other when they thought she was not listening. Crew members found excuses to walk past the holding area and stare at her through the bars. Even the other prisoners looked at her differently now. War Chief Thrax visited her cage 3 days after the Hellhound fight. He stood outside the bars for a long time without speaking. His yellow eyes studied her like she was some kind of puzzle he could not solve. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful. You interest me, human. My warriors tell me you killed the pack without fear or hesitation. They say you moved like a predator, not prey. Tell me what training made you so effective. Lisa met his stare without blinking. Basic military training. Nothing special. Your hellhounds were not as dangerous as you thought. Thrax made a sound that might have been laughter. Perhaps you are more dangerous than you appear. Tomorrow we will test this theory with a different challenge. I hope you are ready for something more difficult. The next morning brought new opponents to the arena. Lisa found herself facing 3 other prisoner groups in a forced combat scenario. The rules were simple. Last group standing would live to see another day. Everyone else would feed the arena's cleaning creatures. Zeph and Krix were placed in her group along with 2 other prisoners she had not spoken to before. One was a thin blue-skinned alien with multiple arms. The other looked almost human except for the silver eyes and pointed ears. Neither seemed happy about being paired with the newcomer. This is not fair, the blue alien complained. We have fought together for weeks and know each other's abilities. The human will get us all killed. Lisa ignored the criticism and studied their opponents. 2 groups of 3 prisoners each stood on opposite sides of the arena. One group consisted of large reptilian creatures with thick hides and sharp claws. The other was made up of insect-like beings with cutting appendages and natural armor. We need a strategy, Zeph said quietly. The Vorthok, he pointed to the reptilians, are strong but slow. The Chitauri, he indicated the insects, are fast and venomous but fragile. If we work together we can divide them and take advantage of their weaknesses. The silver-eyed humanoid nodded agreement. I am Quinn from the Centauri colonies. I can provide ranged attacks if you give me materials to work with. The blue one is next from the trading guilds. He is good with electronics when they are available. Lisa listened, but she was already forming her own plan. Group tactics required trust and coordination. She had neither with these beings. Better to use them as distractions while she eliminated the real threats. When the arena horn sounded to begin combat, she moved away from her supposed allies. The Vorthok charged toward the center of the arena with weapons raised. The Chitauri spread out to flank from the sides. Both groups ignored Lisa as she circled toward the wall. They focused on the more obvious threats like Zeph's massive frame and Quinn's energy projections. Lisa reached a pile of metal debris and began selecting pieces that could serve as weapons. A long rod with a sharp end became a spear. Several smaller fragments went into her pockets for throwing. She moved carefully to stay out of the main battle while the other prisoners engaged. The fight was brutal and chaotic. Zeph grappled with two Vorthic warriors while trying to avoid their claws. Quinn fired energy bolts that scattered the Chitauri formation but could not penetrate their natural armor. Nex tried to stay mobile, but one of the insects caught him with a cutting appendage across his back. Lisa waited for the right moment. When the Vorthak leader broke away from fighting Zeph to attack Quinn, she struck. Her improvised spear punched through the reptilian's thick hide between his shoulder blades. The creature roared and spun around, but Lisa was already moving. The Chitauri were harder targets because of their speed, but Lisa had advantages they did not expect. She used the metal fragments like grenades, throwing them to create distractions and force the insects into positions where she could reach their vulnerable spots. Her military training included close combat techniques that worked regardless of opponent anatomy. When one Chitauri tried to corner her near the wall, Lisa grabbed its cutting arm and used the creature's own momentum to drive the blade into its companion's head. Insect blood sprayed across the sand as both aliens went down thrashing. The crowd above had gone quiet again. Lisa noticed this pattern was repeating. Correct spectators expected certain outcomes from arena combat. When those expectations were violated, they became uncertain and nervous. Instead of excited, the battle ended with Lisa's group as the only survivors. Zeph had multiple wounds, but nothing fatal. Quinn was unconscious but breathing. Nex had bled out from his back injury. Lisa stood among the bodies without a scratch on her as guards entered to collect the survivors. Lisa saw War Chief Thrax speaking urgently with his advisors on the command platform. Their body language suggested confusion and concern. This was clearly not normal arena behavior. Back in the holding area, Zeph confronted her directly. You let Nex die when you could have saved him. You used us as bait while you eliminated the real threats. That was not team fighting. That was something else entirely. Lisa cleaned alien blood from her hands using water from the wall dispenser. Nex was already wounded and slowing us down. Quinn will recover. You are still alive. The mission was successful. Mission, Crix spoke from his cage. Interesting choice of words, human. Most people would call it survival, not a mission. Unless survival is what you were trained for. Quinn regained consciousness and stared at Lisa with his silver eyes. I watched you during the fight. Your movements were too controlled and your tactics too ruthless for someone with basic military training. Who are you really? Lisa settled back in her cage and considered how much to reveal. These aliens had earned some honesty through shared combat, but the full truth would have to wait. My name is Lisa Carter and I was assigned to patrol duty in this sector. That much is true, but not the whole truth, Zeph pressed. I have fought alongside many warriors from different species. You fight like someone who has killed before, many times. The way you handled those prisoners was not self-defense. It was execution. Sometimes execution is necessary, Lisa replied quietly. Sometimes people need to die for the greater good. Sometimes the only way to protect innocence is to become something they would fear. The holding area fell silent as her words sank in. Crix was the first to speak again. There are rumors about human black operations. Stories of agents who work in the shadows doing things regular military cannot. Ghost soldiers who appear when normal methods fail. Lisa did not confirm or deny anything, but she did not look away from their stares either. Let them draw their own conclusions. The truth would come out eventually. When War Chief Thrax decided to increase the stakes again that night, she heard guards talking in the corridor outside. They spoke in hushed tones about checking her identity against military databases, about contacting Krex intelligence for more information on human special forces, about whether keeping her alive was worth the risk. Lisa smiled in the darkness of her cage. The Krex were finally starting to understand they had caught something more dangerous than a simple patrol captain. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. As they tried to test the limits of what she could do, she was looking forward to showing them exactly what humans were capable of when they stopped pretending to be civilized. The arena fights changed after Lisa's group combat victory. War Chief Thrax no longer sent her against animals or other prisoners. Instead, he began testing her against Krek's military units in what were supposed to be executions rather than entertainment. The first squad consisted of 6 shock troopers in full combat armor with energy weapons. Lisa entered the arena to find them already in position with weapons trained on her. There were no debris piles or rocks to use as cover. No weapons provided for the condemned prisoner. Just open sand and certain death. The crowd above was larger than usual and included many high-ranking Krex officers who had come to see the human finally eliminated. "This ends now," War Chief Thrax announced through the arena speakers. "The human has caused enough disruption. Execute her and dispose of the body." The squad leader raised his weapon but hesitated when Lisa began walking directly toward them. She moved with calm confidence despite facing overwhelming firepower. Her hands were empty and visible, but something in her posture made the soldiers nervous. "Stop, or we fire," the squad leader commanded. Lisa kept walking. "I said stop," his voice carried less authority than before. Lisa was now close enough that they could see her eyes clearly. What happened next would be discussed in whispers throughout the Krex fleet for months afterward. Lisa did not attack the soldiers with hidden weapons or superhuman abilities. Instead, she began talking to them in their own language. Her words were quiet and measured, but they carried across the silent arena. She spoke about their families back on the Krex homeworld, about the children they would never see grow up, about the dreams they had abandoned to become soldiers, about the fear they felt every day but could never admit to their comrades, about the nightmares that came when they tried to sleep. The squad leader's weapon began to shake in his hands. One of the other soldiers made a choking sound and stepped backward. Lisa continued speaking about death and loss and the price of violence, about how easy it would be to simply let go of the pain and fear when the first soldier put his weapon to his own head and pulled the trigger. The crowd above erupted in shocked voices. The squad leader tried to maintain order, but 2 more soldiers turned their weapons on themselves rather than continue listening to Lisa's voice. The remaining 3 soldiers fled toward the arena exit screaming. Lisa stood alone among the bodies and looked up at War Chief Thrax with the same calm expression she had worn throughout the encounter. The Krex commander's face showed emotions that his translator could not convert to human words. Guards swarmed into the arena, but they stopped well away from Lisa and used long-range stun weapons rather than approaching directly. Even unconscious, she was transported in restraints and isolation gear. When she woke up, her cage had been moved to a separate section away from the other prisoners. Zeph managed to communicate with her through the wall between their sections. "What did you do to those soldiers?" "The guards are terrified to come near your cage. They are saying you can kill with words alone." Lisa's reply was matter-of-fact. "I showed them the truth about themselves. Most people cannot handle that level of honesty. It breaks something fundamental in their minds. That is not a normal military skill." Quinn's voice came from another direction. "Even special forces do not train soldiers to drive enemies insane with conversation." "What kind of training did you really receive?" The answer came not from Lisa but from overhead speakers as War Chief Thrax addressed her directly. "We have received information about you, Captain Lisa Carter. Earth Defense Force records show you were the only survivor of an incident at Proxima Station. 300 researchers and support staff died under circumstances that remain classified." Lisa remained silent, but Crick spoke from his distant cage. "Proxima Station. I remember hearing about that. The investigation team found patterns carved into the walls. Messages written in blood? Researchers who had killed themselves in elaborate ways for no apparent reason. The official report blamed equipment failure and atmospheric contamination," Thrax continued. "But the classified files tell a different story. They describe systematic, psychological breakdown among the station personnel. Mass suicide triggered by exposure to something that drove them insane. Something or someone," Lisa said quietly. Her voice carried clearly through the holding area despite the distance between cells. Sometimes people learn things they are not ready to know. Sometimes the truth is more dangerous than any weapon. The lights in the holding area flickered as if the ship's power systems were having problems. Guards reported equipment malfunctions near Lisa's section. Several crew members requested transfers to other duties rather than work near the human prisoner war. Chief Thrax tried a different approach. He brought in a Krek psychologist to analyze Lisa's methods and find countermeasures. The session lasted 3 hours and ended with the psychologist being carried out in restraints. While babbling incoherently about shadows behind his thoughts, Lisa's reputation spread beyond the arena. Krek's crew members began avoiding the corridors near her section. Several guards refused direct duty assignments involving the human prisoner. Rumors circulated about voices heard in empty rooms and equipment that activated by itself. The breaking point came when Lisa escaped from her cage without using force or lockpicking tools. Security footage showed her guard unlocking the door himself after a 17-minute conversation. The audio was corrupted, but analysts could see the guards. Body language changed from professional alertness to confusion to desperate fear after opening the cage. The guard handed Lisa his weapons and access codes, then walked calmly to the nearest airlock and ejected himself into space. His final transmission consisted of laughter and repeated phrases about seeing the patterns behind everything. Lisa did not run or hide after her escape. Instead, she began moving through the ship with purposeful determination. She avoided main corridors and security checkpoints, but made no effort to remain completely hidden. When crew members encountered her, she would speak briefly with them before continuing on her way. The results were predictable. Krek's personnel began experiencing breakdowns at an alarming rate. Some requested immediate transfers. Others simply stopped reporting for duty. A few were found in their quarters having harmed themselves in ways that medical staff could not understand. Chief Thrax finally understood the true nature of his prisoner. He was not dealing with a captured soldier, or even a dangerous special forces operative. He had brought something aboard his ship that treated psychological warfare like an art. From emergency protocols went into effect as Lisa made her way toward the command deck. Blast doors sealed sections of the ship while remaining crew evacuated to emergency stations. Thrax ordered all personnel to avoid direct contact with the human and use only remote weapon systems, but Lisa was not just loose on the ship. She was hunting. Each conversation with crew members revealed more about Krek's psychology and social structure. She learned their fears and weaknesses with scientific precision, then used that knowledge to spread chaos throughout the vessel. The ship's computer systems began reporting impossible errors. Crew members claimed to hear voices in the ventilation systems. Several officers were found in their quarters having written detailed confessions about crimes they had never committed. Lisa reached the command deck 12 hours after her escape. She did not break down the doors or fight through security barriers. Instead, she convinced the bridge crew to let her in. By the time War Chief Thrax realized what was happening, his own officers were turning their weapons on each other. The final confrontation took place with most of the bridge crew dead or incapacitated. Thrax faced Lisa alone while emergency signals broadcasted throughout the ship. She stood before him without weapons or threats, but he could see death in her eyes. "What are you?" he whispered through his translator. Lisa smiled for the first time since her capture. "I am what happens when humanity stops pretending to be civilized." War Chief Thrax stood alone on his command deck, facing the human who had destroyed his ship from within. Emergency lights cast red shadows across the bridge while damage reports scrolled endlessly on screens that no one was left alive to read. The proud Krek's warrior who had commanded respect through strength and violence now trembled before a small human female who carried no weapons. "You want to know what I am?" Lisa said as she stepped over the body of Thrax's communications officer. "I am a solution to problems that conventional military cannot handle. When diplomacy fails and war is too expensive, humanity sends people like me." Thrax backed against his command chair but could not retreat further. His yellow eyes darted around the bridge looking for escape routes or weapons, but found nothing useful. "You are not a soldier. Soldiers fight with honor and follow rules of combat. You're something else, Lisa nodded and activated the ship's communication systems with casual familiarity. Her fingers moved across Krex controls like she had used them for years instead of hours. I am what happens when survival becomes more important than conscience. When protecting innocent lives requires becoming something those same innocents would fear, the communication array came online and began broadcasting on all Krex military frequencies. Lisa's message would reach every ship in the sector within minutes. She looked directly into the primary visual sensor as she spoke. This is Captain Lisa Carter of the Earth Defense Force addressing all Krex vessels in this system. Your war chief Thrax made the mistake of capturing a human citizen and forcing her to participate in gladiatorial combat. This action has been deemed an act of war against humanity. Thrax tried to interrupt but found he could not speak. Something in Lisa's presence had robbed him of the ability to form words. She continued her broadcast while monitoring his vital signs with detached scientific interest. The Krex Dominion will immediately withdraw from all human territory and release any prisoners currently held in your facilities. You have 48 hours to comply with these demands. Failure to do so will result in additional response teams being deployed to your ships. She paused to let that information sink in throughout the Krex fleet before delivering the final part of her message. Be advised that humanity's military classification system includes personnel designated as Omega-class operatives. These individuals are deployed only when normal rules of engagement have been suspended. Lisa turned back to Thrax, whose breathing had become rapid and shallow. Your species values strength above all else. You believe that physical power and technological superiority make you superior to other races. But you never learned the most important lesson about warfare. The war chief managed to force out a single word. What? The most dangerous predator is not the one with the biggest claws or the sharpest teeth. It is the one that understands how other predators think. The one that can turn their own instincts against them. The one that makes them choose death over continued existence. Lisa activated the ship's internal sensors and displayed the current status throughout the vessel. More than half the crew was dead or incapacitated. Most of the remaining personnel had barricaded themselves in their quarters and refused to respond to emergency calls. 3 separate sections reported equipment failures that made no technical sense. I did not bring weapons aboard your ship, Lisa continued. I did not hack your computer systems or sabotage your equipment. I simply showed your crew members something they were not prepared to see. The truth about themselves and their place in the universe. Thrax tried to activate emergency protocols, but his hands shook too badly to operate the controls properly. What truth? What did you show them? Lisa's answer was delivered with the calm precision of a medical diagnosis. I showed them that their entire culture is built on fear. Fear of appearing weak. Fear of losing status. Fear of admitting that violence is not strength but the absence of imagination. Once they understood this, their psychological framework collapsed. The communication system chimed with incoming messages from other Krex vessels. Lisa monitored the responses while continuing her conversation with the dying war chief. Several ships were already requesting permission to withdraw from the sector. Others reported crew problems similar to what had occurred aboard the Bloodfang. Your reinforcements are experiencing difficulties, Lisa observed. Word travels fast in military communications networks. Your officers are learning that they captured something more dangerous than they realized. Some of them are smart enough to understand the implications. Thrax collapsed into his command chair as his strength finally failed. You cannot defeat the entire Dominion with mind games. We have thousands of ships and millions of warriors. Lisa smiled again, and the expression was colder than the void between stars. I do not need to defeat your entire military. I only need to demonstrate what happens when you threaten human civilians. This ship will serve as an example. Your survivors will spread the story throughout your fleet. She moved to the navigation controls and began plotting a course toward Krex space. I am going to take this vessel back to your homeworld. Your government can decide whether they want to negotiate or discover what other capabilities humanity has been keeping secret. The war chief made one final attempt to assert authority. The crew will never allow you to command this ship. They will fight to prevent such dishonor. Lisa gestured toward the security monitors, showing empty corridors and abandoned duty stations. What crew? Most of them are dead. The survivors are too terrified to leave their quarters. Your ship belongs to me now by right of conquest. She activated the intercom system to address any remaining Krex personnel. This is your new commanding officer. All crew members will report to designated stations and resume normal duties. Anyone who refuses will be personally interviewed to determine their fitness for continued service. The response was immediate. Reports flooded in from throughout the ship as surviving crew members abandoned their hiding places and returned to work. None of them wanted to risk a personal conversation with the human who had driven their comrades insane over the following hours. Lisa established complete control over the Bloodfang. She studied Krex technology and military procedures with the same methodical approach she had used to analyze their psychology. Within a day she was operating the ship more efficiently than its original crew. Throx lived long enough to witness this transformation before his mind finally broke under the strain of watching everything he believed about strength and dominance proven wrong. His last coherent words were a warning transmitted to Krex High Command about the true nature of human military capabilities. The message reached Krex leadership 3 days before Lisa arrived at their homeworld with a captured battlecruiser and a crew of broken warriors. Her demands were simple: complete withdrawal from human space and formal recognition of humanity's right to defend its citizens by any means necessary. The Krex Dominion agreed to all terms within hours of her arrival. They also issued standing orders throughout their military to avoid contact with human vessels and report any sightings immediately to High Command. The official records classified humans as a Class Omega threat, requiring extreme caution. Lisa returned to Earth aboard the captured ship with her mission complete. The Proxima Station incident had been properly avenged and humanity's reputation in the galaxy was forever changed. No longer would they be seen as weak prey waiting for stronger predators. In her final report, Lisa recommended that additional Omega-class operatives be deployed to other sectors where human interests might be threatened. The universe was full of species that respected only strength, and sometimes that strength needed to be demonstrated in ways that conventional military doctrine could not provide. The report concluded with a simple observation that would become doctrine for future operations. The greatest weapon humanity possesses is not our technology or our numbers. It is our ability to become whatever the situation requires, even if that means becoming something our enemies will learn to fear. War Chief Thrax spent his remaining years in a medical facility designed for beings whose minds had been damaged beyond repair. He never spoke coherently again, but nurses reported that he would sometimes whisper the same warning over and over. Humans do not fight like other species. They do not just kill you. They make you want to die. The warning spread throughout the galaxy, carried by traders and diplomats who had heard the story secondhand. Most species dismissed it as exaggeration or propaganda until they encountered humanity directly. Then they learned that some legends are actually true and some monsters wear human faces.